Good afternoon to all the students. Today we are going to discuss on Mendelian disorders. We have two sets of disorders that we have to exercise from the chapter Principles of Inheritance and Variation. In our yesterday's class, we have clearly dealt with three principles given by Mendel. One is law of dominance and law of segregation, where he derived these laws from monohybrid cross. Third is Mendelian law of independent assortment, which is from dihybrid cross. What are Mendelian disorders? The disorders which are inherited across the generations following Mendelian principles are addressed as Mendelian disorders. What are Mendelian disorders? The disorders which are inherited via Mendelian's principles. Disorders inherited via Mendelian pattern of inheritance. Mendelian pattern of inheritance. And what are chromosomal disorders? Chromosomal disorders occur through the chromosomal mutations. The mutations that happen in the number of chromosomes, either increase in the number of chromosomes or decrease in the number of chromosomes. Be it autosomes or allosomes, the mutation happens in the chromosomes, either the increase or decrease in the sets of chromosomes will lead to the disease chromosomal disorders. So, yes, genetic disorders are of two types, one Mendelian disorders and second are chromosomal disorders. Today in this class we are going to learn about Mendelian disorders. I already told you the type of disorders which you see that follow Mendelian pattern of inheritance, and we have two major categories in this Mendelian disorders. It can be autosomal disorders and allosomal disorders. It can be autosomal or allosomal disorders. Autosomal disorders or allosomal disorders. Autosomal disorders can be autosomal recessive and autosomal dominant. Autosomal recessive and autosomal dominant. Allosomal disorders, if the pattern of inheritance is via X or Y chromosomes, it is the allosomal disorders. It can be via X chromosomes and Y chromosomes. X chromosome and Y chromosomes. X and Y chromosomes. X chromosomes can be dominant and recessive again. Okay, dominant and recessive. X linked dominant disorder, X linked recessive disorders. X linked dominant and X linked recessive disorders. First, autosomal recessive and autosomal dominant, if you have to observe. Before knowing the examples, what will be the pattern of inheritance in both autosomal recessive and autosomal dominant? X linked recessive and X linked dominant. In what case you can see the disease? What should be the allelic combination? We will look into that first. So, here if you observe autosomal recessive disorder, the disease should be on both the alleles. The mutation should be on both the alleles, because according to Mendelian pattern of inheritance from law of dominance, he said that factors occur in pairs, that is gene occur in pairs, and from the pair of alternating characters Okay, when you have two alternating alleles, dominant allele will suppress the effect of recessive allele. Recessive allele, to exhibit its phenotype, it should be in homozygous condition. So, autosomal recessive diseases you will observe only in the recessive condition, homozygous recessive condition, homozygous recessive. Homozygous recessive condition only you will see autosomal recessive diseases. Autosomal dominant diseases are exhibited both in the homozygous dominant and heterozygous dominant conditions. Same the case with X-linked disorders. X-linked dominant disorders you can see both in the homozygous and in the heterozygous condition. But X-linked recessive disease is exhibited only in the recessive condition. When disease is on both X chromosomes, in homozygous recessive condition only it will exhibit the disease. In heterozygous condition, it acts as carriers. In heterozygous conditions it acts as carriers. So, here autosomal recessive condition you will observe homozygous recessive diseases, homozygous recessive condition only you will observe autosomal recessive disorders. What type of autosomal recessive disorders we need to learn? Autosomal recessive disorders include, here in our chapter, 4 types of disorders are included. 1. Phenylketonuria, sickle cell anemia, thalassemia, and cystic fibrosis. Got it? So, you have 4 types of autosomal recessive disorders that you have to learn in your NCERT 12. What are those disorders, ma? Phenylketonuria, sickle cell anemia, thalassemia and cystic fibrosis. Autosomal dominant diseases, you just have an example, but then you are not learning much on the disorder, and the example is myotonic dystrophy. Example, myotonic dystrophy. Got it? And X-linked dominant and X-linked recessive disorders. X-linked recessive disorders are very important. In your NEET exams, the questions most of the times are put either from X-linked recessive disorders or from autosomal recessives. Most of the time 60 to 70% of the questions from Mendelian disorders you can come across X-linked recessive diseases only. Those are 2 disorders. One is color blindness, second hemophilia. So, yes, once let us have a recap on the introduction of genetic disorders. Genetic disorders are caused by mutations. Mutation can happen in the level of genes or mutation can happen at the level of chromosomes, be it increase or decrease in the number of chromosomes or the mutation at the gene. Any of these 2 reasons will cause genetic disorders. Genetic disorders are of 2 types based on the pattern of inheritance. First is Mendelian disorders, second will be chromosomal disorders. Mendelian disorders are of 2 types based on the type of the chromosome it is being inherited with. Those are autosomal Mendelian disorders, allosomal Mendelian disorders. Autosomal and allosomal. Autosomal disorders, if you see, we have 2 types, autosomal recessive and autosomal dominant. Autosomal recessive, we have 4 disorders to be learnt in detailed way. Those are phenylketonuria, sickle cell anemia, thalassemia and cystic fibrosis. Autosomal dominant includes myotonic dystrophy. And then here if you see, allosomal disorders are of both types, X chromosome and Y chromosomes. X chromosome, again based on the pattern of inheritance, we have X-linked dominant disorders and X-linked recessive disorders. X-linked recessive disorders, we have color blindness and hemophilia, and the mode of inheritance based on the allelic combinations, as these are following Mendelian pattern of inheritance. From Mendel's law of dominance, it is very clear that the recessive phenotype will be expressed only during homozygous recessive condition, and autosomal dominant disorder is exhibited both in the homozygous dominant and homozygous recessive condition. Here X-linked recessive, again the disease is expressed when you find the mutation on both the X chromosome. If only one X chromosome is having the mutation, then they act as carriers in females. Okay. So, this is the gist of complete Mendelian disorders. If you want, you can take a screenshot of it. And now, we will first start with X-linked recessive disorders. X-linked recessive disorders. How they do express both in males and females? In males, if the disease is on X chromosome, then it exhibits the disease. In females, the mutation should occur on both X chromosomes to exhibit the disease. If only one X chromosome is mutated, other X chromosome is common or normal, then this type of females will act as carrier females. Carrier females. Clear with this, right? And now if you see Mendelian disorders, they are caused by changes or mutations in a single gene, and they will be inherited to the next generation following Mendelian pattern of inheritance. First type of disease, if you observe color blindness, what is this type of disorders? The people who are affected by color blindness, they are unable to recognize between two colors, that is red and green. In between these two colors, they will not be able to recognize the difference between red and green colors. That is all about the color blindness disease, because the mutation occurs on the cones present in the eye. Okay, the cone regions are affected where they are unable to detect the colors between red and green. This is the vision of a normal eye, and this is the vision of a color blind man. Okay, where they are unable to distinguish between green and red color. Here everything appears pale green. Okay. So, here once you look into the theory also, color blindness is X-linked recessive trait caused by a deficiency in either the red or green cone of the eye. The cone regions are affected because of the gene mutation, and this will be inherited to the next generation when both the autosomes or both the alleles are having the same type of mutation in red and green cones. Got it, ma'am? This causes inability to distinguish between red and green colors. This deficiency is caused by mutation in X chromosomes genes. They follow crisscross pattern of inheritance. They follow crisscross pattern of inheritance. I will tell you the pattern of inheritance as well, because you will get the application based questions as well. In the next slide, we are going to exercise the possible allelic combinations and the probability of the offsprings being affected with this disease. They follow crisscross pattern of inheritance. They affect around how much percent of males? 8% of males and 0.4% of females. Because in males, if one X chromosome is affected, it will affect the males. But in females, to exhibit the disease, both the X chromosomes should be affected. Got it, ma? So, this is about color blindness, and now we will see all the possible allelic combinations of color blindness. So, in the first case, let us take or let us suppose female and male. Female is a carrier of color blindness and male is normal. In second case, female and male. Okay. Female is color blind, married to a normal male. In third case, let us suppose female is normal and male is color blind. In fourth case, we will see that female is a carrier and male is color blind. Female is a carrier and male is color blind, right. So, now we will be able to see all the 4 types of applications, and here you observe carefully. In the first case, if I have to draw a Punnett square and explain you in detail. So, what are the allergic combinations that are given to us, ma? In the first case, look at here, female, male. So, male is normal, female is having, female is a carrier and male is normal, right. So, what will be the possible allelic combinations? You will get one carrier, one color blind male, normal female, normal male. For example, in a question, this type of question is given and you are asked with the ratio. Okay. In the question, if they are clearly mentioning what is the probability of the disease in female offsprings or what is the probability of the disease in male progeny, if they are specifying female progeny and male progeny, you have to take the probability from only females and males. Only males, if you consider, the probability of the disease is 50%. Only females, if you consider, the probability of disease is 0 and the probability of carrier females is 50%. If you consider all the offsprings, in question he is asking you what is the percentage of offsprings being affected, then it will be 25%. So, here from this, if you have to consider from females affected progeny, there are 50% carriers. Only from females, if you have to see. From males again 50% are affected, only from males, only this probability we have to take, 50% affected. Got it. And if you have to consider the overall offsprings, all progeny, complete progeny, 25% affected and 25% will be carriers. Got it, right? So, from females 50% are only from females, 50% carriers, only from males 50% carriers. From the entire progeny 25% are affected, 25% are carriers. If what combinations are there? Carrier female with normal man. In next combination you observe, in next combination yeah. Male, normal male with affected female. So, what are the types of combinations you are getting? If you consider only male progeny, from only male progeny, affected females are giving rise to affected males. Okay, affected female will give rise to affected males, because if X chromosome in male is affected, then they are affected. So, here from the entire offsprings, 50% offsprings are affected, and if the question is only from male progeny, 100% of male progeny are affected. Got it right? So, here from all progeny, 50% are carrier females and 50% are affected males. 50% are carrier females and 50% are affected males. Here you see a normal female with affected male, and if you draw a checkerboard here and look all the allelic combinations in the offsprings, male you can see it is affected, females are normal. So, you have XCX, XY, XCX, XY. So, from the entire progeny, affected progeny are 0 and affected females are 0, 50% of them are carriers. From all progeny, 50% carriers. And here you see ma, carrier female with affected male, carrier female with affected male. Here yeah. So, here how much percent from the entire progeny are affected? From all progeny, 25% are affected, 25% affected, 50% sorry 25% are carrier, sorry 50% are affected when all progeny are considered, one affected female and affected male. So, 50% of the progeny are affected. %% are affected, and how many carriers? 25% are carriers. These are all the possible allelic combinations, and if you observe your NEET previous year questions also, from the combinations or the probability based questions are asked from X-linked recessive disorders only. If you want, you can take a screenshot of this, which is useful for your later reference. Next question, hemophilia. Hemophilia, which is X-linked recessive disorder again, this is also known as bleeding disease or bleeder's disease, because in this disease the genes which are mutated are blood clotting factors. Blood clotting factors get mutated and bleeding continues from wounds. Okay, that is the disease hemophilia, which is otherwise called as bleeder's disease. Look at the theory also once, you will get more idea. This is sex-linked recessive disease, which is X-linked recessive trait. This shows transmission from unaffected carrier female to some of the male progeny. That is what we have observed from color blindness also. A carrier female is giving an affected male, right? Carrier females are giving rise to affected males. In these two cases you can observe. The allelic combinations or probability based questions will be similar for color blindness and hemophilia, because both of them are X-linked recessive disorders only. Yeah. Due to the presence of defective form of blood clotting factor, exposed blood of the affected individual will fail to coagulate. Exposed blood will fail to coagulate. This results in people bleeding for longer time after an injury, easy bruising, and an increased risk of bleeding in their joints or brain. That is the level of risk, and at last this disease is lethal. The possibility of female becoming hemophilic is extremely rare because the mother of such a female has to be at least a carrier and father should be hemophilic. When a female will get the disease, father should be hemophilic and mother should be a carrier at least. Then only you can see the offsprings being homozygous for the disease and you can observe the disease in the females. And female progeny being hemophilic is very rare. And here also you have two types of hemophilia, hemophilia A and hemophilia B. This is due to low amounts. Hemophilia A is because of low amount of clotting factor 8. Okay, hemophilia A is due to low amounts of the clotting factor 8, which is thromboplastin. And here what factor is getting affected? AHG. Anti-hemophilia globulin factor is getting mutated here. Hemophilia B is also known as Christmas disease, and this affects the clotting factor 9. Okay, this affects the clotting factor 9. This is also known as Christmas disease. Got it? These are the two types of hemophilia. You have to remember which clotting factor is being mutated and affected both in hemophilia A and hemophilia B. Got it right? So, this is all about today's class, and here you can see this is a family chart of Queen Victoria, wherein the disease is first observed in the royal family. Here you can see Queen Victoria is a carrier for hemophilia, and this is a normal allele. Male does not have any disease, but female is a carrier. In offsprings, if you observe, you can see an affected male, and from here you can observe carrier females. Got it? Carrier females again giving rise to, you have to see across the generations, which is first parental generation, and this is F1 generation, this is F2 generation, this is F3 generation, F1, F2 and F3 generation. From parental generation, where you can see a carrier female and a normal male, in the F1 generation you can observe carrier females with affected male. You can see all the carrier females with affected male. In F2 generation, all the carrier females are having one affected male offsprings. If you can see the highlighted region which I am seeing, first carrier females are giving rise to affected males in the F2 generation. Here also the same case. Affected males are giving rise to carrier females. This is crisscross pattern of inheritance. What pattern? Crisscross pattern of inheritance, which is observed both in the color blindness and in hemophilia. Here also carrier female giving rise to affected males and a carrier female. In F3 generation also, if you observe, again from carrier female affected males, carrier female affected males, carrier female affected male, lastly carrier female affected males. Like that the family history ends, okay, because of hemophilia. And across the pattern of inheritance, what you can observe? Crisscross pattern of inheritance, wherein carrier females are giving rise to affected males, affected males are giving rise to carrier females. The disease is passed from carrier female to son, from affected father to carrier daughter. Okay. This is the mode of inheritance which is known as crisscross pattern of inheritance. So, the key takeaways of today's session, initially we have begun with genetic disorders, because in yesterday's class we have clearly dealt the 3 laws of inheritance. One is law of dominance, law of segregation and law of independent assortment. From that, from genetic disorders we have 2 types, Mendelian and chromosomal. In Mendelian disorders, what type of inheritance is observed? Mendelian pattern of inheritance, observed both in the autosomal chromosomes and allosomal chromosomes, where you have again a classification based on the diseases exhibited by dominant alleles or recessive alleles. Likewise, we have seen the examples of autosomal recessive diseases you have to observe are sickle cell anemia, phenylketonuria, cystic fibrosis and thalassemia. And in today's class, we have completely dealt with 2 types of X-linked recessive disorders, which include color blindness and hemophilia. The major points we have noted is all the probabilities of the allelic combinations, all the possible allelic combinations, probability based application and clear mode of pattern of inheritance both in color blindness and hemophilia, and type of diseases as well, which is the clotting factor that is actually being affected both in the hemophilia A and hemophilia B. And finally, we have learned the chart from the family tree of Queen Victoria. We have learned the crisscross pattern of inheritance. These are the key takeaways of today's session. In the next class, we will look into the molecular basis of inheritance. Thank you.